There is a place on this earth where winter does not visit. It lives there permanently. In Yakutia, temperatures fall to -96 degrees. The air itself becomes a weapon. But in the deepest cold, something fragile was about to be found. Daria Ivanovna had lived alone in this cabin for 11 winters. The morning had started like any other. Fire, tea, silence. She poured water from a kettle she had kept near the fire all night, the only way to keep it liquid. Outside, the wind had been building since before dawn. Then she heard it, a sound that did not belong to the wind. A low, trembling cry, faint, desperate, coming from just beyond her door. Daria set down her cup. She had not heard another living voice in weeks. She pulled her shuba tight and moved toward the door. The cold hit her like a wall the moment she cracked the door open. And there, collapsed in the snow beside her woodpile, she saw it. A young reindeer, barely alive, its body trembling against the frozen ground. Its front leg was bent wrong, swollen, dark beneath the fur. It could not stand. Daria knelt beside it. Her knees sank into the snow. She did not hesitate. She placed her hand on its neck. Beneath the frost, she felt a heartbeat faint, but there. She whispered something not to anyone, just to the cold. Then she stood, gripped the reindeer beneath its chest, and began to pull. It took everything she had, but she would not leave it to die. She closed the door against the storm. The cabin shrank around them, woman and animal, breathing the same trapped air. The reindeer did not move. Only its eyes followed her wide, dark, afraid. She moved slowly. She had learned long ago, fear listens to patience. She pulled a wool blanket from her bed, the only one she had, and laid it beside the animal. She did not cover it, not yet. She left the blanket as an offering close, but not touching. Outside, the wind screamed louder. Inside, the fire popped and hissed. Daria had not always been alone. This cabin once held two voices, two sets of hands. Her husband Semyon had built this cabin with his own hands. Every log carried meaning. He had passed 11 winters ago. Since then, Daria had kept the fire burning for both of them. Every morning began the same. Check the fire, melt snow for water, count the wood. The woodpile was lower than it should have been. She had noticed it 3 days ago, but the blizzard had sealed the world shut. The woodpile outside was buried. She rationed 2 logs every 4 hours, no more. She ate the same thing she had eaten all winter: dried fish, hard bread, salted fat. The reindeer watched her eat. Its nostrils twitched at the scent of dried fish. She tore a piece of bread and placed it on the floor halfway between them. It did not eat, not yet, but its eyes never left the bread. Night came fast. In Yakutia, winter steals the daylight. Only 4 hours remain. She lit the kerosene lamp. Its small flame doubled the world inside these walls. The bread was gone. Sometime while she wasn't watching, the reindeer had taken it. Daria smiled. It was the first time her face had moved that way in a long time. That night, she slept in the chair. She gave the bed space to her guest. The temperature dropped further in the night. The walls groaned with the cold. By morning, the window was opaque, frozen solid from edge to edge. She checked the reindeer's leg. The swelling had not gone down. She tore a strip from an old wool shirt and wrapped it around the joint, tight enough to hold, gentle enough not to hurt. She spoke to it softly. Not words that meant anything, just the sound of a voice. In the afternoons she mended. Clothing, boots, the small tears that cold leaves behind. Sometimes she sang old Yakut songs that Semyon had loved. She sang them for the walls, and now perhaps for the reindeer. On the 3rd day, the reindeer tried to stand. It fell, but it tried again, and Daria understood this animal had not given up. She named it that evening, Yuki. It meant snow. That night, Yuki shifted on the floor and rested her head against Daria's boot. The blizzard did not stop. 5 days now. The world beyond the door was erased. Inside, Daria counted the firewood again. 14 logs. Maybe 5 days' worth if she was careful. She had survived worse. The winter of 2003, when the pipes froze and the nearest village was 60 kilometers away. Yuki was eating now. Dried moss from the storage shelf, bread crumbs, whatever Daria could offer. She talked to Yuki the way she used to talk to Semyon. About the weather, about nothing, about everything. For the first time in 11 winters, the silence in this cabin had company. But the storm was not finished, and winter does not care about tenderness. Day 6. The temperature had dropped beyond what the thermometer could read. The fire was smaller now. Daria fed it one log at a time and prayed each one would last. Yuki could stand now shakily on 3 legs, keeping the injured one raised. She took a step, then another. The cabin floor creaked beneath hooves that belonged to the open tundra. But the cold was winning. The frost on the walls was thicker each morning. 8 logs left. Daria counted them twice, hoping the number would change. She considered breaking furniture. The chair, the shelf, everything but the bed Semyon had built. Yuki pressed close to her that night. The reindeer seemed to feel what Daria could not say. In the small hours, Daria woke to a sound she had not heard before. Silence. The wind had stopped. She did not dare hope, but she rose in the dark and put her hand against the door. Morning came pale and still. For the first time in a week, the sky held its breath. Daria tried the door. It would not move. The snow had sealed it shut. She found the iron shovel. She would dig her way out inch by inch. It took her 2 hours. When the door finally cracked open, the light was blinding. The cold outside was sharper than before. Without the wind, it was a different kind of weapon. Silent, invisible, absolute. The woodpile. She had to reach it. Everything depended on it. She dug, shovel by shovel. The snow was dense as concrete. Her arms burned. She kept digging. Her hands cramped. The cold found the gaps in her mittens and punished her for every second outside. Then a dark edge appeared in the white. Wood. She had reached the pile. She pulled the logs free, one by one. Each one heavy with frost. Each one a promise of another day. She made the trip 7 times. By the end, she could barely lift her arms. But the pile inside was full again. She closed the door, fed the stove, and sat on the floor beside Yuki, too tired for the chair. The days that followed were quieter. The storm had passed, but the cold remained patient, constant, everywhere. Yuki grew stronger. By the 8th day, she could walk the full length of the cabin without stopping. She began testing the injured leg, a touch to the ground, a flinch, then holding just for a moment. Daria changed the wrapping each morning. She was gentle, and Yuki let her be. She fed Yuki from her own rations now. Less bread for Daria, more dried moss for Yuki. She did not think about it. She just did it. Some nights, Yuki would press her nose to Daria's cheek, warm breath against cold skin. It felt like being remembered, but Daria was growing thinner. She could feel it in her clothes, the looseness, the gaps where her body used to fill. She ate less so that Yuki could eat more. She did not think of it as a choice. It was simply what you do. On clear mornings, she opened the door to let the sun in. The light fell across the cabin floor like a visitor. Yuki would stand at the open door and stare outward, her nostrils wide, her body leaning toward the tundra. Daria watched and understood. This cabin was a refuge, not a home, not for Yuki. But not yet. The leg was not ready, and the cold was still too deep. So they continued, sharing bread, sharing warmth, sharing the long silence of winter.
The birds are
One
back.
afternoon, Daria heard a sound she had not heard in weeks.
Hear that?
Birdsong,
They're back.
faint, far away, but real. The days were growing, she was sure of it now. 4 hours of light had become 5, maybe 6. But with the longer days came a new danger. The stored food was running low. She gave Yuki the last of the dried moss. Daria ate the bread. It was hard as stone and tasted like survival. That night, she lay awake listening to Yuki breathe. In the rhythm of the animal's lungs, she found a reason to keep going. Day 12, the food was gone. Daria melted snow and drank warm water to quiet her stomach. Yuki sensed the change. She stayed closer, her body pressed against Daria's legs whenever she stood. Daria tried to go outside to search for anything. Bark, frozen berries beneath the snow, anything. She found a handful of frozen cranberries. They were hard as pebbles. She divided them in half, some for her, some for Yuki. Back inside, she boiled the bark into a bitter tea. It was not food, but it was something warm with substance. That night, the temperature plunged again. A second wave of cold deeper than the first. Inside, the walls cracked, the wood contracting so violently it sounded like gunshots in the dark. The stove struggled. The fire seemed smaller, weaker, as if the cold were pressing down on the flames themselves. She fed it another log, then another, rationing abandoned. Survival now measured in hours, not days. Yuki lay pressed against her all night. The animal's body heat radiated through Daria's clothing like a second fire. Day 14. 6 logs remained. Daria sat by the stove and did not move for a long time. She looked at Yuki. The reindeer looked back. In that look, something passed between them that had no name. That evening, she broke the chair. It had been Semyon's chair, his place at the table. She burned it. The fire ate the chair in under an hour. She stared at the empty space where it had stood and whispered an apology. Next went the shelf, then the small stool. She kept the table and the bed. She would burn herself before she burned Semyon's bed. 3 logs left, 1 night of fuel. After that, only the table. She fed the stove the last 3 logs as darkness fell. She knew this was the final fire. She did something she had not done in years. She pulled Yuki close, lay down beside the stove, and let the tears come. The fire burned through the night. By 3 in the morning, the flames were dying. By 4 in the morning, the last ember went dark. The cabin was silent, and for the first time, truly cold. The cold came in like a living thing. It found the cracks, the seams, the spaces between every log. Daria could feel it settling on her skin, on her eyelids, her lips, the tip of her nose, cold like a hand pressing down. She pulled the shuba tighter. She pulled Yuki closer. There was nothing left but body heat and will. Hours passed. The cabin walls cracked and groaned. The world outside was trying to come in. Daria's breathing slowed. She felt warm, dangerously warm, the kind of warmth that comes before the end. She thought of Semyon. His face came to her clearly as if he were standing at the door, waiting. But then something moved against her, something warm and insistent. Yuki pressed her body harder into Daria's chest. The reindeer's heart beat against her ribs, strong, steady, alive. It was the loudest sound in the world. Daria opened her eyes fully.
I breathe.
She was still here. They were still
Thank you,
here.
my
She
friend.
whispered into the dark, "Thank you." She was not sure if she meant Yuki, or God,
We are
or the
ready.
cold itself for letting her stay. The hours crawled. The darkest cold pressed down on them like a weight. But Yuki did not move. Yuki held her ground. And then so faintly she almost missed it, the window began to change color. Gray became blue. Blue became pale gold. The longest night was ending. Daria opened her eyes to pale gold light filling the cabin. She was alive. She could not believe she was alive. Yuki was awake beside her. The reindeer's dark eyes watched her calmly, as if surviving the night had been certain all along. Daria sat up. Her body ached in every joint, but she moved. That was enough. She looked at the stove. Cold. Dead. She looked at the table. Still standing. She looked at the bed. Untouched. She had kept her promise. She needed fire. She needed it now. There was only one option left, the woodpile outside, buried under new snow. She opened the door. The air hit her lungs like swallowing glass. But the sky was clear. The sun was rising. She dug. Slower this time. Her arms weaker. But the wood was there. It had waited for her. She carried the logs inside, fewer this time. Her body could not manage more. But enough. Enough to restart the fire. Her hands shook so badly she could not strike the match. 3 times she tried. 3 times the match slipped from her fingers. The 4th match caught. A tiny flame no bigger than a fingernail. She cupped it with her whole body and carried it to the stove like a newborn. The fire grew. Slowly at first, uncertain, hesitant, then stronger. The cabin exhaled. Daria sat before the fire and held her hands toward it. The heat was painful. She did not pull away. She boiled water. She drank. She boiled more and set a bowl for Yuki. The simplest acts, the most important. That afternoon, something changed outside. Daria heard it before she understood it. A dripping sound. The temperature was rising. Not much. A few degrees. But in Yakutia, a few degrees is the difference between stone and water. Day 16. Daria found more frozen berries beneath the larch trees. Enough to stain her fingers red. She brought them inside and shared them with Yuki. They ate together in the firelight, the closest thing to a feast either had known in weeks. Over the following days, the world outside slowly softened. The sharp edges blurred. The silence began to fill with small sounds. Yuki's leg was healing. She tested it now, 4 hooves on the ground. Weight distributed, steady. She stood at the door again, longer this time. Nostrils wide, body leaning outward. The tundra was calling her name. Daria knew. She had always known. You cannot keep what does not belong to you. But not
Yuki,
today.
Come, it's time.
Today the cold was still too deep, and there was still bread to share. 3 more days passed. The sun climbed higher. The snow began to change, crystal to crust, powder to pack. On the morning of day 19, Yuki walked to the door and stood there without moving. She did not look back. Daria set down her cup. She rose slowly. She crossed the cabin to the door. She opened the door. The sun filled the frame, and for a moment, neither of them moved. Yuki stepped forward. One hoof crossed the threshold, then another. She walked into the snow. She walked toward the sun. She watched until Yuki was a shape on the horizon, then smaller, then nothing. Daria closed the door. The cabin was quiet, the kind of quiet that has a sound of its own. She picked up the blanket, held it to her face. It still smelled like Yuki warm fur, frost, and something wild that had no name. She folded it, placed it on the bed. Then she sat at the table alone and drank her tea. The day passed slowly. She mended a sleeve. She boiled water. She looked at the door more times than she would admit. Night came. She lay in bed for the first time in weeks. The mattress felt too soft. The space beside her felt too empty. Morning, day 20. The sun was higher than she had seen it all winter. The light was almost warm. Daria opened the door to let the morning in. She stood in the light and breathed. And then she heard it. A sound. Soft hooves on crusted snow. Getting closer. Daria stepped forward. Her hand gripped the doorframe. She did not trust her own ears. And then there, a shape against the snow, moving toward her. 4 legs, small antlers catching the sun. Yuki. The reindeer walked steadily toward the cabin. No limp, no hesitation. She knew exactly where she was going. She reached the cabin. She stopped 3 feet from the door. She looked at Daria, and Daria looked at her. Then Yuki stepped forward. She pressed her nose to Daria's open palm. Warm breath on cold skin. A circle completed. She had come back. Not because she needed shelter, not because she was hurt. She came back because she chose to. Daria laughed, a sound so unfamiliar to this cabin that the walls seemed to listen. She stepped back. Yuki followed. The reindeer walked into the cabin as if she had never left. Daria unfolded the blanket from the bed and laid it on the floor. Yuki walked to it, circled once, and lay down. That night, Daria did not sleep in the bed. She sat on the floor beside Yuki. Some things are too precious to be far from. The days softened around them. The snow began its long retreat. The sun climbed higher each morning. Daria began her old routines again, but now, every routine included Yuki. Each morning, Daria opened the door and Yuki walked out. Each evening, she returned. It was not captivity. It was choice, repeated daily. Weeks passed. The snow thinned. Green appeared, the first color the earth had shown in months. Daria sat outside the cabin for the first time on a wooden crate, face to the sun, Yuki grazing nearby. Sometimes she talked to Semyon about Yuki. She told him he would have loved her. Spring came slowly to Yakutia. It always does. But this year, it felt like it arrived on 4 legs. The cabin no longer creaked in the cold. The walls stood straight and warm. The fire burned easy. Daria built a new chair. She built it from larchwood gathered in the thaw. It was not as fine as Semyon's, but it was hers. She placed the photograph of Semyon on the shelf above the new chair. Old love and new life in the same corner of the room. Months later, when the grass was high and the streams ran full, a sound came from the tundra that made Yuki lift her head. Daria watched from the doorway. She knew that sound. She had been waiting for it all summer. Yuki stood still for a long time. Her ears pointed toward the herd, her body angled toward the tundra, but her hooves did not move. She turned around. She walked back to the cabin. She pressed her nose to Daria's hand, and that was her answer. Years later, the people in the nearest village would tell the story of the old woman and her reindeer, living together at the edge of the world. They said the reindeer followed her everywhere, to the stream, to the woodpile, to the edge of the forest, like a shadow with antlers. They said you could see them from the road if you knew where to look. An old woman, sitting in the sun, her hand resting on a reindeer's neck. Both of them perfectly still. Both of them at peace. Some bonds are not chosen. They are found in the cold, in the dark, in the space between one heartbeat and the next. She saved a reindeer, and the reindeer saved her right back.